In the heart of Seoul, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and luxury cars hummed through polished streets, lived Kang Dae-jin, a ruthless Korean billionaire known to the world as the cold and calculating CEO of K-Group Holdings. His name inspired both fear and admiration. Investors trembled before his decisions, and competitors called him the Silent Storm. But behind the tailored suits, marble offices, and bodyguards, there was a man who carried loneliness like a shadow. Dae-jin had everything except genuine affection. He had been used too many times, his wealth attracting only false smiles and shallow promises. So when he met Sonia, everything changed. Sonia was a young African woman who had come to Seoul on a cultural exchange program. Warm-hearted, curious, and unbothered by appearances, she worked part-time at a small art cafe in Gangnam, a cozy place filled with sketches, soft jazz, and the smell of roasted coffee. One rainy evening, Dae-jin walked into that cafe dressed casually in jeans, a black hoodie, and a baseball cap, an attempt to escape his corporate life for a moment of peace. Sonia was at the counter, humming to a soft tune, when he ordered a latte. "Rough day?" she asked with her bright smile. He blinked, surprised. No one dared to ask him such a question, not even his board of directors. "You could say that," he murmured. "Well, this cup is on me," she said, sliding him the drink. "You look like you need it." That small act of kindness disarmed him completely. He began visiting the cafe every evening, sometimes silent, sometimes smiling faintly as Sonia teased him about his taste in coffee. She called him Jean, not knowing she was addressing the same man whose company owned half the city's skyline. He loved the simplicity of their connection. No money, no titles, just laughter, walks under streetlights, and shared stories about dreams. Sonia told him about her wish to open an art studio for children. Dae-jin, pretending to be a freelance business consultant, promised to help her one day. For the first time in years, he felt seen as a man, not as a billionaire. But fear lurked in him. He was terrified that once she found out who he truly was, she would change. Treat him differently, bow to him, or worse, leave him. So, he kept his identity hidden behind his calm smile and modest clothes. The truth came out unexpectedly. One sunny afternoon, Sonia was invited by her friend to help organize a charity exhibition. Ironically, sponsored by K-Group Holdings. She was arranging paintings when she glanced at a massive digital screen showing the event's chief sponsor. Her heart froze. The man in the sleek black suit, shaking hands with foreign investors and smiling for cameras, was unmistakable. Kang Dae-jin, her Jean. Shock rippled through her. Every laugh, every simple date, every humble word. Had that all been a lie? When Dae-jin arrived at her apartment later that evening, she didn't even let him speak. "Why didn't you tell me who you really are?" she demanded, her voice trembling. He sighed deeply, his expression stripped of arrogance. "Because I didn't want to lose you, Sonia. I wanted one person in this world to love me without the weight of my name or money." Silence filled the air. She stared into his eyes, the same eyes that had always looked at her with sincerity, whether in a cafe or a penthouse. "I don't care about your money, Dae-jin," she finally said, tears pooling in her eyes. "I fell for the man who waited outside my cafe in the rain just to see me smile. That's the man I love." After that night, the mask was gone. Dae-jin no longer needed to hide. Sonia met his world, the world of chauffeurs, business meetings, and luxury, but she brought warmth into it. She didn't treat him like a king. She teased him, cooked for him, made him laugh until his eyes crinkled. The same man who once ruled his empire with fear was now tucking a blanket around Sonia while she napped on his couch. And the world noticed a change in him. The ruthless CEO was suddenly smiling at staff, funding art programs for children, and attending events with a woman whose presence softened his every edge. When the media discovered Sonia's identity, they expected a scandal. Instead, they found something rarer. A billionaire who had finally learned that love wasn't about power, but peace. On one quiet night, overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline from his penthouse, Dae-jin wrapped his arms around Sonia as she leaned on the balcony rail. "You know," she whispered, The day I found out who you really were, I thought I'd lost you. He chuckled softly. And I thought I'd lose you if you ever knew. Funny? She said, turning to meet his gaze. It only made me love you more. The city below sparkled like stars fallen to earth, and for once, the billionaire who had everything realized he finally had what truly mattered. A love that saw through his wealth to the man within. After Jade revealed his true identity and Sonia chose to stay, their world shifted, no longer divided between wealth and simplicity. Instead, it became a fusion of both, where love redefined power and warmth softened the cold edges of luxury. Sonia moved into his grand penthouse, a glass fortress high above Seoul. The first night she arrived, she stood by the tall windows, gazing down at the glowing city. Jade came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. This view, she murmured, is beautiful, but it feels lonely. He smiled faintly. It was until you walked in. That night, the billionaire who once found comfort only in silence now found peace in the rhythm of her breathing beside him. The next morning, Sonia joined him for breakfast at the long marble dining table. But instead of the dozens of dishes laid out by his chef, she asked for something simple: scrambled eggs and toast. Jade laughed, watching her eat happily while ignoring the expensive silverware. You're unbelievable, he teased. And you, she replied playfully, need to learn how to enjoy real food. It started small, Sonia's laughter echoing in his mansion, her warmth spreading through every hallway. But soon, her influence reached beyond his home. One afternoon, she visited his company headquarters. Everyone froze when she entered. A black woman with confidence and grace, holding Jade's hand as if he were just a man, not the feared CEO. His staff whispered, "Is that her? The one who changed him?" In the boardroom, where tension usually ruled, Jade surprised everyone by announcing new community projects inspired by Sonia. K-Group will sponsor art and education programs for underprivileged children, he declared, glancing at her with pride. This initiative came from someone who reminded me that business isn't just about power. It's about purpose. The room erupted in murmurs. Some were stunned, others inspired. But for the first time, Jade's empire felt alive, human. At night, he would return from long meetings to find Sonia painting in the living room, her hands splattered with color, her hair tied back messily. "What are you painting this time?" he'd ask, loosening his tie. She'd smile. "Us, but not like people see us, just how we feel." When he looked at the canvas, he saw two figures under a single umbrella, walking through the rain, the same night they met. Sometimes, they would cook together, playfully fighting over seasoning, ending with flour on her face and laughter filling the kitchen. To his surprise, Jade began canceling late meetings just to be home with her. "You've ruined my schedule," he'd joke. And you've ruined my peace," she replied, laughing. But not everyone celebrated their love. The media criticized her, the foreign girlfriend of Korea's most powerful man. Some investors whispered that Sonia would distract him. When Jade heard those comments in a board meeting, he stood up and said coldly, "Anyone who thinks love weakens me has clearly never felt it." His words became a headline that silenced the gossip. That night, Sonia cried quietly on his chest. "I didn't mean to bring you trouble." He lifted her chin and whispered, "You didn't bring me trouble, Sonia. You brought me peace. And peace is worth fighting for." Months passed, and Jade's empire grew even stronger. Investors admired his renewed vision, his calm yet passionate approach. Sonia's presence had turned his ruthless efficiency into something deeper, purposeful leadership. Together, they launched the SOUL Foundation, sharing opportunities, uniting lives. The name came from her heart and his initials intertwined. They funded schools in Africa and Korea, built art centers, and sponsored cultural exchanges. And every event began the same way, with Jade standing proudly beside Sonia, introducing her as the soul of my life and the heart of this dream. At home, their love was a gentle rhythm, mornings filled with shared laughter, evenings with soft jazz, and nights spent wrapped in quiet devotion. Sometimes, he'd find her asleep on the couch, covered in paint from her latest project. He would kneel, wipe her cheek gently, and whisper, "My messy little artist." She'd open her eyes and smile. "And you, my grumpy billionaire." He'd chuckle softly. Not grumpy anymore. One evening, as they sat on the balcony watching Seoul's sunset, Sonia rested her head on his shoulder. "You know," she whispered, "I used to think rich men only cared about power." He turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And I used to think love was a weakness." She smiled. "We were both wrong." He kissed her forehead and replied, "No, we were both waiting for the truth." And as the city lights flickered beneath them, Kang Daejin finally realized what all his power had been missing. A love so real it turned the ruthless into the gentle, and the lonely into the whole. Months turned into a year, and Sonia's presence became inseparable from Daejin's world. The ruthless billionaire who once ruled through fear was now ruled by love, and the world noticed. Everywhere they went, the cameras followed, not because of scandal, but because people were moved by the story of the woman who softened the heart of Korea's coldest businessman. But to them, fame meant nothing. At home, they still lived simply. Her laughter filling the penthouse, his gentle hands brushing the paint off her face. It happened one quiet evening on the rooftop of K-Group's tallest building. Daejin had told Sonia they were attending a company dinner, but when she stepped out of the elevator, she found the rooftop transformed. Soft candlelights, gentle music, and the scent of lilies drifting in the cool air. She blinked in surprise. "Daejin, what is all this?" He turned toward her, dressed not in his usual corporate suit, but in a simple white shirt. For the first time, his eyes looked nervous. "This," he said softly, "is me without my title, without my power. Just a man, standing before the woman who changed his entire world." Her breath caught as he knelt down, revealing a simple ring, elegant, yet not flashy. "When I met you, I was drowning in emptiness. You gave me air. You showed me that love isn't something to fear, but to live for. Sonia, will you be my forever peace?" Tears filled her eyes. "You already know my answer," she whispered. When he slid the ring onto her finger, fireworks illuminated the Seoul skyline. But to them, the only light that mattered was the glow in each other's eyes. The wedding was a blend of cultures, a stunning mix of Korean elegance and African warmth. Held at a serene garden in Jeju Island, it was intimate, attended only by close friends, family, and a few business partners who had witnessed Daejin's transformation. Sonia walked down the aisle wearing a flowing gown with subtle African beadwork sewn into the fabric. Her veil glistened like morning dew. Daejin, standing at the altar in a traditional Korean hanbok embroidered with gold, could barely breathe as she approached. When their eyes met, the world seemed to pause. The vows were simple yet powerful. Daejin said, "You taught me that love is not possession. It's peace. Not wealth, but warmth. I promise to never let fear hide my truth again." And Sonia replied, "You showed me that even the coldest soul can bloom with love. I promise to stand beside you, not behind your power, but with your heart." When they kissed, the wind seemed to carry their joy across the island, the union of two worlds that had once seemed too far apart. Married life for them wasn't about luxury. It was about shared simplicity in the midst of abundance. Sonia turned one wing of their mansion into an art school for children. Every morning, laughter echoed through the halls as young artists splashed colors across canvases. Meanwhile, Daejin surprised everyone in his company with his new leadership style. The once feared CEO now listened, encouraged, and rewarded creativity. He often quoted Sonia in meetings, "Business should build people, not break them." At night, they'd walk barefoot in their garden, holding hands. She'd lean on him and whisper, "You still work too hard." He'd smile, brushing her hair aside. "And you still love too much." "Then we're even," she'd tease. Their story inspired millions. Articles called them the Empire of Love, and their foundation grew into a global movement, helping children, empowering women, and promoting cross-cultural unity. Years later, As they sat by the beach in Jeju, watching the waves, Sonia rested her head on his chest. "Do you ever miss the old days before all this?" she asked softly. He smiled, kissing the top of her head. "Never. The old days were rich in gold but poor in meaning. You gave me everything I didn't know I needed." She looked up at him. "And what's that?" "Peace," he whispered. "And purpose." The ocean breeze swayed her curls as they sat in silence, two souls who had conquered not just the world of business, but the walls of fear within their own hearts. Kang Dae-jin, once the ruthless billionaire feared by all, became the man loved by millions, thanks to a woman who saw through his mask and loved the heart beneath. And Sonia, the once ordinary girl in a cafe, became a symbol of grace, strength, and love that transcended color, status, and borders. Together, they built more than an empire. They built a legacy of love that the world would never forget. The years that followed their wedding were the most peaceful of Dae-jin and Sonia's lives. Their love had weathered scrutiny, distance, and difference, and what was left was pure, steady devotion. They still lived in the Seoul penthouse, though it now felt more like a home than a mansion. Sonia had filled it with colors, laughter, and music. The once cold marble floors were now softened with warm rugs, art pieces, and little touches that reflected both their worlds. African patterns blended with Korean simplicity. But the greatest color came when Sonia discovered she was expecting. The day she told him, she didn't need words. Dae-jin came home late from a board meeting, shoulders heavy with the day's weight. She met him at the door, her eyes glistening, holding up a small white box. "What's this?" he asked with a tired smile. "Open it." Inside was a tiny pair of knitted baby shoes. For a moment he froze, then looked up at her, disbelief turning into awe. "Sonia, are you?" She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. He dropped his briefcase instantly, pulled her into his arms, and whispered against her neck, "Thank you for giving me the one thing I never knew I was missing." That night, as they lay together, he rested his hand on her belly and said softly, "This child will grow up knowing love, not power, not pride, just love." 9 months later, on a calm spring morning, their son was born, Kang Junyu. He had Sonia's warm brown skin and Dae-jin's almond-shaped eyes. When Dae-jin first held him, his hands trembled. The ruthless man who once ruled an empire without emotion now wept openly, whispering, "My little king, you are the best deal I've ever made." Sonia laughed weakly from her hospital bed. "He already looks like you." He leaned down, kissed her forehead, and replied, "No, he looks like love." Their home transformed again, baby laughter echoing through the halls that once held only silence. Dae-jin became the most devoted father, learning how to change diapers and warm milk bottles despite his awkwardness. He would cancel meetings just to feed Minjun or take him to the park in disguise, holding his little hand while Sonia snapped photos. The staff adored watching their boss crawl on the floor, playing peekaboo with his son. At night, Sonia would paint while Dae-jin rocked Minjun to sleep, humming softly. A man once feared for his voice, now using it to soothe his child. Who would have thought the ruthless CEO could sing lullabies? Sonia teased one night. He smiled. "Only for my two favorite people." Years later, K-Group evolved under Dae-jin and Sonia's shared vision. Not just a corporation, but a foundation for change. Together, they opened the Minjunyu Global Academy, offering free art and technology programs to children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Sonia became an international ambassador for cultural unity and women's empowerment, while Dae-jin became known as the billionaire with a human heart. At every public event, he credited her openly. "Everything good that this empire has become started with the kindness of one woman who gave me a cup of coffee and a reason to live." Their story became legend, told in universities, books, and even documentaries as a modern tale of love that transcended color, class, and power. One golden evening, years later, the couple sat on the balcony of their Jeju villa, Minjun now a bright young boy playing in the garden below. Sonia leaned against Dae-jin's shoulder, watching the sunset. "Do you ever regret hiding who you were from me back then?" He smiled gently, kissing her temple. I regret nothing, because if I hadn't hidden, I might never have known who I could be when loved for the truth. She smiled, eyes glistening. And now, he said softly, pulling her closer. I don't have to hide, because you are my truth. The sky blushed orange and gold, and their son's laughter carried through the air. The ruthless billionaire was long gone. What remained was a husband, a father, and a man at peace. And in that quiet glow, their love, born in simplicity, tested by truth, and crowned by family, became a legacy the world would remember forever. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment. Also like, share, and subscribe to my channel, and click on the notification icon so that you will get notified whenever a new story is uploaded.